It's Matty Fresh on the track up at State, and I'm bringing to you live my boys Alec and Nate, Tequila Ty, Jay, Nelly, and Zillin in the building. So kick it back, pour the drink, we chillin' because I'm boozing and betting and ballin' like I'm 2-6 in the blue kicks. Watch me move quick, yeah, this the blueprint. So who's getting involved? Welcome into the show. This is Booze, Bets, and Ball, baby.
Well, I hope you didn't miss us too much. I know we missed a lot. So yeah, the first three games of the first three games of the Terry Smith era all resulted in losses. Two of them extremely heartbreaking as usual around here. Ohio State kind of did what Ohio State does to Penn State. That is what it is at this point. The Iowa game, frustrating on multiple levels. I know I'm way beyond that. I can't believe there was that Iowa podcast talking about this being like Iowa's biggest win in a decade. I don't know what the hell they were talking about. But good for you, I guess. I don't know. Grunkmeyer, not great first start to be expected. Katron Allen, really good in that game. It's a game they should have won. Defense got some turnovers when they needed to. The Iowa attempting the 60-something yard field goal before the half that got returned for a touchdown by Penn State was great. But the defense, man, I'll get to it in the Indiana game, but that was bad. I mean, to let the quarterback of Iowa to run for 130 yards and 2 touchdowns, it was a joke. And it lost them the game. And I mean, they ran right down the field after you have a 24-19 lead with 5 minutes left in the fourth. And it took them 3 because they just ran it right down your throat. I mean, that was what it was. There was enough time left for Penn State to score, but we know how this goes with Penn State trying to make comebacks at the end of games. It just doesn't happen. And it's the case. Ohio State is the same game every year. Close at half, but they could not. I've never seen a team connect on so many deep balls, even at the pro level. That Ohio State offense is pro level. That was insane. Those receivers are insane. They were, 5 for 5 on passes over 40 yards? I've never seen anything like that in a college game ever. Just insane the way they moved up and down the field. The Indiana game, that's a heartbreaker. Man, those catches on the final drive, it was the most Penn State thing ever. You thought they were finally maybe going to pull off one of these. Number 2, Indiana, never won at Penn State. So you think, you know what, maybe. And you're down 20-7 in the middle of the third quarter, but you climb back 2 touchdowns in the fourth, and you're up. I'm doing this, looking at this because I just black out memory-wise at these games. You're up 24-20, 6 minutes left, and you got to stop. So you got the ball back, and you milked it down to 2-minute warning. And on the first play, you got a 7-yard sack and then right down the seam for 20, whatever it was, and they got the first down. And then Calvin Johnson and Randy Moss were playing receiver for them because those catches were insane. And it was what it was again. And once again, with 36 seconds, Penn State's not moving the ball down the field to score. Look, we could talk about Michigan State this week. I think this is a game Penn State should win. They're a touchdown favorite on the road. Penn State's 3-6 and Michigan State's 3-6 look completely different. And I think Penn State has looked better at times. I don't know how much longer you get those guys to buy in. I think the Indiana game at home on Fox, the number 2 team in the country, it was easier to get them up for this. I don't know if we see that same effort against Michigan State, but if these guys want to make a bowl game, they have to win out. So that matters to them, which I don't know if it does. Let's be honest. A lot of these guys will not be back here next year. They might just want to get out of here as soon as possible. But some of the younger guys, that either want to put something on tape for the next Penn State staff or another staff, I think you get them to play. And the guys that are going to be draft eligible, they probably want to keep their stock up. It's kind of those guys in that middle ground that I'm not sure how much you get out of. We're gonna see, I guess. I want to see if they could win out. You got Michigan State this week, you got Nebraska without Dylan Raiola, and you got Rutgers. Show me something, I guess. Does it matter? I guess not. But you'd like to see something, and you'd like to see some guys compete. And look, Penn State is not just going to say, I'll go out the door. There's going to be NIL money to spend at Penn State. That doesn't disappear with James Franklin. If anything, it will improve, and it will improve without him. That's kind of on the record. So, play, fight for the school, fight for the team, and I'm sure you'll get rewarded if you want to stick around. So, I think there's stuff to play for guys on this team. I think there's stuff for coaches to coach for. Andy Kotelnicki, I don't know what the hell you're coaching for, but maybe something. Terry Smith, I think, is a lock to stay here. I don't know for sure it's an on-field role, though. Him being the next GM of the team has been tossed around a lot, which I like because he has connections from recruiting, mostly in Western Pennsylvania, but all across the state and, nationally to an extent. He knows the school better than anyone that they could possibly bring in from a coaching perspective or a GM perspective. There's no one out there that's going to know as much about Penn State and the football program as him. So I think, I don't want to go on this tangent now, but I think that's the way to go. If Terry Smith's going to stick around, I think it is as the GM, especially because he has relationships with the current recruits. I'm not going to say commits because Penn State doesn't have any commits right now, as far as I'm concerned. And guys that he's committed or recruited in the past that might be entering the transfer portal. That's kind of been a big thing that Franklin, to his credit, talked about. Even if I'm not winning the initial recruitment, we saw this with Chop Robinson, I'm building the relationship to get them down the road. It's happened a couple times here. So Julian Fleming to a lesser extent, and Nolan Rucci too. So that's that. Whether or not they win these games, I don't know. Does it really matter? I think it does a little bit. I mean, we want to see them win a game. It's been 6 straight. It's been by 49 days, 55 days, something like that, since we saw them win a game. Win a game. Just do it. It'd be nice. Let's talk coaching. So, yeah, who's the coach going to be? I tell you who's not going to be Kurt Cignetti. It's not going to be Matt Rule, thankfully. I don't think it's going to be Jeff Brom now that he has an extension. I know the whole extension doesn't mean they're out of it, but it's usually, if they're signing the extension now, it's a sign that I'm not looking. If they signed it in the past, people were trying to pull up the fact that Drinkowitz signed an extension this offseason or something. That's the situation is totally different now than when it was whenever the hell he signed that in the winter, the spring, the summer. I don't know when it was, but it's during the season stuff that is usually a sign of back off. I'm not leaving. Stuff that happened before that. Franklin did that too. When he was rumored to go to USC and LSU was open, I think it's a post 21. Yeah. So that's kind of where you're at. Names, Brian Hartline comes up a lot. Hartline's interesting because he has probably the best assistant recruiter in the country. High energy guy, kind of has that, that arrogance to him, the cigar smoking, all that, posting the pictures of that whenever he gets a big recruit or they win. He has an edge to him, which kind of Dan Lanning has. And everyone's kind of been like, where do I find the next Dan Lanning? Is that Brian Hartline? I think it might be. The problem is he's not far enough along as a play caller to maybe take a job as big as Penn State. I don't know how many games has Ohio State played, 9. So he's had 9 games as the sole play caller at Ohio State. I'm sure Brian Day still has some input too, so I won't even go as far as say sole. We know he kind of was, and they took it away from him, and then Chip Kelly came in. So that's the one thing that concerns me about Hartline. What I will say is, Brian Dable just got fired by the Giants. If you could bring Brian Dable in to be your offensive coordinator, I think you could get away with Hartline for next year. I think eventually over time Hartline, would work himself up, be a good coach. But he brings in the talent, he brings the energy, and then someone like Dable's probably not made it to be an NFL head coach, but could have a good career doing coordinator type work. That could work. I could see that. Some of the other names, it's Markowitz, who I brought up. He is getting a lot of like Franklin 2.0 comps because I guess he's never beat an SEC team with a winning record. He's at Missouri. In the power rankings of SEC teams, especially the new SEC, where the hell would you have Missouri? And he has them at 11 wins, or it was 10 wins, or 12 wins, 10 wins, and they should get to 8 or 9 this year without Bo Prabula because he got hurt. Missouri's in the back 5 of SEC powers, I'd say. Vanderbilt, Arkansas, Mississippi State, they're kind of in that category. I don't think that's a bad job. The job he's done has been that bad. Good recruiter. He's brought kids from PA Zollers. He can recruit. He likes NIL, which Kraft likes. I understand the coaching stuff. That can't be. I just think the SEC is tough when you're at Missouri. Penn State's a top 5-ish, I'll say ish at this point, Big Ten team. Ohio State, Michigan, Oregon, USC, and Penn State, probably the 5 biggest brands in the Big Ten. Missouri's on the other side. They're one of the 5 smallest. So does going up in school, does that help you win those games? And I just don't think it's a fair shake on him yet, because I think he's done a really good job at a school like Missouri that has, I think, 8 double-digit win seasons all time, and he has 2 of them, and he probably would have had another one had Prabula not gotten hurt. So not totally out on him the way some people are. Brent Key, Georgia Tech. Again, there's some complicated stuff with a lot of these candidates because a lot of them are at their alma mater. Brent Key, Georgia Tech at his alma mater. Clark Lee, Vanderbilt, alma mater. Kenny Dillingham, Arizona State, alma mater. Although he said some things today about the program's bigger than me or something along those lines. So I don't know if that means he's looking around. He's not really come up for the Penn State job from what I've seen, but Brent Key, it's been reported by Tyler Donahue, he did interview. So I don't know, there's guys out there. There's a lot of people oh my God, this is getting so bad. Look, anyone who thought Penn State was hiring a coach a week after firing Franklin that was never happening. Unless it was Urban Meyer, right? Because Urban Meyer didn't have a coaching job currently. He's doing TV, so he can leave whenever, right? Now, it wasn't going to be Urban Meyer, but that's just the point I'm making. He's the only guy who could have left now and became the coach, not to coach this season, but to be the coach going forward. He's the only person on the planet, really, that it could have been announced now. No one else is, especially guys that are still alive for the playoff or coordinators on playoff teams. They're not doing that now. It's just not happening. And I know Penn State's losing a commit every day. It is what it is. Once they get a coach, half those guys will probably come back, or that coach will get guys that were committed to his last school who would probably rank equally to those guys. They'll come. Really doesn't matter. Yeah, there's still options. And there's a lot panic I see. I just don't see a reason to panic. And I know since we've talked, Florida came open, LSU came open, Auburn, there's big schools open. Those are all SEC schools. I think the pool that those schools are looking at in terms of their coaching pool that they want to pull from is different than Penn State's. Summerall is probably going to get one of those. I think they're all going to try with Kiffin. I don't think they get him, but I think there's a little different in terms of who they're looking at to bring in versus who Penn State wants to bring in. Big name guys keep getting brought up. Elko and Bear are going to be in the playoff. I just don't see how no matter how much money Penn State offered them, how they could come. It just doesn't line up timeline-wise. If they're thinking about winning a national championship, they're not going to announce that they're heading to Penn State after the season. That'll just totally lose the locker room, and they'll lose in the first round of the playoff. Or if then they win the whole thing, they're not going to leave. So any coach in the playoff, you just got to push that aside. Now, Heartline as a coordinator different, but any head coach that makes the playoff, there's just no way, especially with the changes in the transfer portal window, like that late December, early January thing. The playoff is barely started at that point. So unless they got bounced round one, like that's not working. So signing days around there too. Now, Penn State will probably try to get guys to push to the second signing period in February, which no one even remembers exists anymore, but could be helpful for them. So there's that. I just don't think it's to say on November 13th, that Penn State is screwed. It's way too early to say that. Like I said, it's pretty much just Signetti and Rule and maybe Brom. I don't think he's totally signed. I don't think he's actually signed it. I think it's just reported that he's headed that way. Really the only guys you're crossing off, I'm crossing off Elko and Kalen. That's just, those two guys are not happening if they make the playoff. Now, Alabama loses to Oklahoma this week, and then we know how the Iron Bowl can go, and they're 9-3. Okay, totally different story, but I just don't see that happening. They're playing really good since that loss to Florida State, and A&M's undefeated. So there's really no chance of them not making the playoff at this point, unless they just totally nuke themselves, which I don't see happening. But Penn State is the biggest available job in the North, in the Mid-Atlantic. You know, draw that line of available jobs. There's nothing else in the region open. Virginia Tech, James Franklin going there apparently. So like, you know, like in your region at least, you can kind of have some pool. And if some of these coaches coaching down south, maybe some of these smaller SEC coaches, smaller school SEC coaches, want to get away from that and think it's a little easier to win the Big Ten and recruit away from all those other SEC schools, then I think Penn State is an attractive option to a lot of them, which is why I think it's way too early for people to press the panic button, because it was just never going to happen this early. So yeah, that's where I'm on the coaching thing. Like I don't know who it's going to be, but I think the chances that Penn State makes a good hire are high. And I see a lot of people saying, like, should have just kept Franklin. Are people forgetting these Northwestern UCLA games where you were 3 touchdown favorites and you lost embarrassing fashion in both of them? I don't know. Like, it's not just that. It was clear he wasn't bought in to NIL and transfer portal fully that you need to be. And it was clear he lost the locker room after the Oregon game. Like, those things combined, still hasn't put out a thank you or anything, by the way. So, like, you just couldn't. It couldn't go on. Whether or not he might have been the best available, it doesn't matter, because some of those things just weren't fixable. And maybe the next guy you bring in isn't deemed as good of a coach as James Franklin, but if all those other things I talked about, the buy-in from the team, the buy-in into investing in NIL and the transfer portal and stuff like that, if this next coach is better at that stuff, then it's a net positive. So I just think a lot of overreactions. This week coming up after this week of games is when I think the BS will start to tone down, and anything you see will actually be more inaccurate reporting in terms of who it could be. There's just so many names getting thrown around so much. But I think it starts to become clear. And the week after Thanksgiving, the first week of December, is when I expect Penn State to have a coach. And if they don't, and one of these playoff coaches really doesn't like where he's at, even though he's in the playoff and might win the national championship. So I don't know, there's a group good and bad at Penn State not announcing a coach, but I just don't think that's going to be the case. If I had to pick now, just based off everything, I think it's going to be Drinkwitz. I think in terms of, kind of what Kraft is looking for in a coach, he marks a lot of the boxes, and he's also not going to make the playoff, so it's a little easier to pull him. I think if I had a bet, I'd say it'd be him right now, but there's a long way to go over the next 3 weeks, and we're going to try to make these updates a little more frequent, and if Penn State wins the game, we'll come back and talk about it, and I'll try to get excited about these games to the point of making shows about them. But for the time being, we're just going to try to stick to the coaching search and see how that goes. But like I said, I think after this week coming up is when you're going to really start to actually get concrete information on who's interested, who's not, who's interviewed, and some of that will have to do with there's some big games this week that will have some wins and losses. So keep an eye on that, and we'll be back to talk next week.